Welcome you, Gabrielle, to today's Ask the Author event. Thank you so much for your time. And you're a long time and one of Australia's foremost crime fiction writers. We were discussing earlier or last week that this is actually your fourth year of writing, so congratulations.
Thank you.
On
Thank
that.
you, Christine.
And you've had, you can correct me if I've got my facts incorrect, but you've got 16 adult novels out there in the wild.
I've got 18.
Oh, 18.
Yes.
Missed a couple. That's
yes.
Naughty of me. And you've got many stories and articles that have appeared widely in the national press and anthologies. But writing crime fiction for adults is not all you do. It's only one side of your repertoire. You've also got quite a number of books written for a teen audience as well. So your award-winning Conspiracy 365 is sold in 24 countries and also adapted to a television series. So that's pretty amazing. And two of your books are also, your adult books I should say, are also movies as well. Correct? Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So your first novel was Fortress. So that's when it all started.
That was my first published novel. I had written 2 novels before that, and they ended up composting the tomatoes, but I learned a lot, and Fortress was my first.
Yeah.
That actually was accepted. Well, the one that I thought was wonderful, my second one, it was called A Death in the Family, and I got the reader's report on it. And the reader said, Mrs. Lord has looked into the woodshed, seen something nasty, thought it was life, and written about it. I know. And I was so angry that I went back and I wrote Fortress in 3 weeks. So
it was good fuel for the Fortress fire.
Some people will know that reference to you know, that funny book, those funny sisters that used to write, the Mitford sisters. The auntie that had seen something nasty in the woodshed.
Yeah. And you've also had Whipping Boy, which was made into a movie with Sigrid Thornton. Did you get to meet Sigrid?
Oh, yes, I did. She's as beautiful offline as she is online.
Yeah. I have to say I'm probably showing my age, but I had to look her up because I
yes.
but I'm like, of course she's been in Downton Abbey. I should have known that for sure. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the start of your career 40 years ago. What was the landscape like?
The landscape was very bare when it comes to crime writing because as my late friend Peter Corris was told by a publisher, there's no point in publishing crime novels in Australia because all the crime novelists come from America. So that really got him going. So he started his Cliff Hardy series. And in fact, The Empty Beach, his first Cliff Hardy novel, and Fortress came out in the same year. And we were the only 2 really practitioners of the dark art. There had been earlier very good crime writers, but they'd been forgotten in the 30s. So that's how the landscape was. Very bare with crime, but other people were writing. But, you know, there wasn't much in the commercial fiction line. I mean, of course, that's silly. There was a lot. Now I think about it. There was the wonderful Ruth Park and Morris West and all those great big writers, the big books. But for crime, there was nothing.
Why do you think that was? I mean, I've got a few theories myself, but
I'm not sure, Christine. I've never considered why that might be the case. I think we were just so used to, you know, the great American crime writers that we were happy to read them.
Yeah, I mean, we've discussed amongst friends quite in depth, you know, whether is it cultural cringe? Was Australian crime just not exciting enough? Or I don't know. I mean, many, like the likes of Michael Robotham, he started his career off writing crime set in another country completely. He's only just starting to come back to Australia.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, he's a very fine writer.
And you,
yes, I don't know what the answer to that question is.
yeah. Oh, just curious. I mean, it's fantastic that it's much more, many more Australian authors out there now writing crime. But you are Australia's queen of crime fiction.
Well, I think I'm the Dowager Queen now, or the Queen Mother of crime, because there are so many brilliant younger, crime writers writing at the moment. So, but I'm quite happy to, be the Queen Mother, or the Dowager Queen.
And so, just delving into your, your actual writing space and your writing journey, you're actually sitting in your studio right now.
In my studio, I've got a beautiful northern run of windows here where the sun shines in beautifully in the winter and doesn't shine in the summer when you don't want it, which is wonderful. I look out at the sea. I saw the first whales this morning coming up the coast. I love seeing the whales, but I wonder what they're going to do at the border. Actually, they'll be turned back probably.
COVID-19 restrictions.
That's right.
And with your beautiful outlook, what time of the day would you normally write, or how would you structure your day? Because this is an Ask the Author event, we really want to get into the nitty-gritty of your process, your style. It's obviously,
well, when I'm writing, I do a lot of research. For me, research is terribly important, and it takes me a while to work out what I need to research. So I'm sort of writing notes and then trying to chase people up to find out what I really need to know. And then once I've got enough research notes, I just feel I've got to start writing. It just feels like I'm going to burst. So that's when I start doing the story outlining. I'm a plotter. They talk about plotters and pantsers, people who write by the skin of their pants. Is that this expression? And people who plot. I'm a plotter because the things I write, a thriller is a very highly engineered piece of technical writing in a sense. It's just got to have certain things in it, and you've got to know how to set it up. And once I've got that sorted out, I start writing the storylines. This happens, and this happens, and this happens, and this happens, and then I start writing. And every day I do some. I work smarter rather than longer these days.
Yeah.
Probably only do 2 or 3 hours a day when I'm writing a novel. But at the moment I'm trying to have a sabbatical, but I've got something nudging that I can't not address, so I'll have to do it.
Where did you learn your craft in the first place? Like you said, you wrote a couple of books. Like what brought you to write all those years ago?
On the job. I learned on the job. There was nothing around. There was the Fellowship of Australian Writers. That was the only thing going. There were no writing courses, no creative writing courses, nothing like that. And I just learned by massive amounts of reading. I think that's one of the best things for a writer. I was a promiscuous reader from childhood. And I always wrote things. When I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I was writing poetry, bad poetry, and short stories and such. And I had an epiphany on my 22nd birthday. I picked up a novel, a biography of Gertrude Stein, and I read one sentence which said, I decided when I was 30 I'd write. And I thought, yep, that's what I'll do. So that put it off for another 8 years. And then on my 30th birthday, I just started writing a novel.
Fantastic.
It was like some sort of hypnotic self-suggestion or something.
Amazing.
And I'd get up at 4:30 because I was working and raising my little girl, and I'd work for a couple of hours, and we'd go to work and school, and then I'd come home, maybe do another hour, and then go to bed and do it all again.
So it was a passionate.
Oh, it had to be done. I don't know what drove me. It means you don't go anywhere, you don't see anyone, but that's how I did it. So once I do that, I have to do 1,000 words a day. That's the rule. I don't leave the house until I've done 1,000 words a day. That's when I'm writing. I'm not seriously writing at the moment.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's my plan.
Even though you're not seriously writing, do you find yourself plotting away,
I can't help it.
looking out the window?
I can't help it. I've recently joined a writers group, which is very interesting actually, and that we have to do 1,000 words a month to bring to the group for discussion and editing. And I thought, I wrote 1,000 words, and I thought, gee, this is interesting. I'll see where this goes. And so that's what I've been doing. I've been writing this, and I think it's probably the beginning of a new thriller.
Oh,
Set in the bush, like Fortress was. I'm going back to the little country town. So
amazing. And how many people are in the writing group? Like, is it?
I'm not sure. You see, I'm a newbie there. I've only done 4,000 words, so that means 4 months meeting, and of course they're online now. I don't know, maybe 6, 8. It varies, I believe.
Yeah. And circling back to Fortress, how did you get published way back when? Like, you know.
Well, Fortress.
In the scanned world of.
I had the same publisher that had read out the damning readers report to me, had asked to see anything else I was writing, and I only had 3 weeks left of this fellowship. I won one of those fellowships for new writers. They'd just come in, and Blanche Dalpichet, she was one of the other writers. There were 4 other writers, new writers. I've never heard of them since, but certainly heard of Blanchy. And so I showed him Fortress because I'd written it in that 3 weeks, but I'd been thinking about it for many, many years. And he rang back and he said, this is very nice. I really enjoyed it, and I think you could get it published in the Women's Weekly. You know, they pay quite well for a long serial. So I said, oh, that's great. You know, they pay $900, and that was a fortune in those days. I thought, wow. Anyway, he must have shown it to someone else, because the next day he rang and he was over the moon. He said, we're going to publish it. I've just sold movie rights. I mean, it just went insane.
Wow.
Somebody could see the potential of it, you know.
Like a fairy tale, really. You hadn't been published before, and then.
Oh yeah, but
movie.
It's like a fairy tale, but you know, there's 2 other books in front of it that never saw the light of day. But the press loves, you know, the shooting star from nowhere. Nothing ever happens like that, really.
So your own bio describes you as having a detailed knowledge of forensic procedures. And so how did that come about, and does it help you now, or do you find that you have to take a different tact when it comes to your forensic procedures?
I used to step out, as they say, with a crime scene detective for about a decade, and he was marvellous. And he would, and I'm also a member of a forensic society, so there's a lot of experts that one can approach, and I'd sometimes take them out for lunch and show them a good time and pick their brains, and that's how you do it. That's how I did it anyway. But look, it's becoming so refined now, and also it's all been privatised. I mean, once the police did all the physical evidence stuff, but no, they don't, except for murder. They still do murder. But anything else gets farmed out to private companies, and it's getting very hard to get information. And it's really hard on the crims now, because they've got them coming and going. You know, they can watch their number plates. They can see where they're driving. I don't know how anyone gets away with anything these days.
Oh, but they do, apparently.
But they catch them generally.
They do. So you released your 18th adult novel. I've got my numbers wrong. Sisters recently.
Yes.
And that takes a slightly different slant to your normal crime writing.
Yes.
Fiction. So tell us about where's the inspiration for the story. I'm just going to bring up.
Well, I seem to have been in the middle of a whole series of books about awful things happening to women. Um, and I just thought I'd like to write a book that doesn't do that. That has
Yeah.
a more hopeful, redemptive sort of feel to it. And I'd always wanted to. Are we still going? Is everything
Yes,
all
yeah, yeah.
right? I've
Just
just
looking at the cover of the
Oh, that's
book.
it. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I got a bit of a fright then. I'd always wanted to set a novel in Crete, and using sisters is terrific. I mean, physical sisters, because sisters are so different from each other, and yet they have that, that blood connection. So it just seemed to be the time between, I hadn't had a commission for a while, and I thought, I've got a year, I can finally do this book that I've been trying to write for many, many years. And so that's how Sisters came about.
And so one of the main characters you've described as holding a special place in your heart, and why?
One of the characters in the book.
Yes, or does one of the characters in the book, sorry.
Oh, does one of the characters?
My question.
I love all my characters, even the naughty ones, especially the naughty ones. No, not really. I like them all. They all start, they live up there. I visit them when I'm writing. They talk to me, and I write down what they say and where they are and what they're up to. It's a funny process. It's very visual. I mean, mentally very visual.
Yeah, yeah. And so what is Sisters about, and why should we read it?
Well, it's about two sisters, very different. One's a very settled, she's a screenwriter. She's married a senior, very, very senior police officer who's in administration, assistant commissioner, acting assistant commissioner. He's under a lot of pressure at the job. And she gets this postcard from Crete. Her younger sister, who's an artist, had gone over there because they've discovered they'd inherited their Cretan grandmother's house. They never knew the Cretan grandmother. They only knew her via their own mother, who didn't ever talk about her much. And so the artist flies over there straight away almost, because she thinks this is marvellous. That's Xanthi as the artist. She's a hard-living, hard-drinking, hard-working artist, and she goes missing on Crete. And Greta finds out via a postcard from some friends who say that the police have just run into a brick wall. They don't know where she is. They don't know what's happened to her. So Greta flies over there to find out what's happened. And once she's there, she just meets this continual deception and wrong leads, and a police officer who doesn't translate what she asks properly, so that she can never trust the translations. She meets Xanthi's lover, finally, chases him down, and he appears very guilty and he lies. So finally you find out what happened to Xanthi, and it's really quite extraordinary. So that's all I'll say.
So you spent a bit of time in Crete.
Yes, I've been there several times.
We've got some
1, 2, 3, 4.
Some photos of your time there. That was your inspiration.
Well, there's a section in Sisters about this beautiful place in Chania called the Sym Synagogue. It's been decommissioned, of course, but it's a place of, because it was bombed and destroyed, during the war, like all the synagogues. And it's now a place of meditation. Anyone can go there. And around the corner, pretty much from where we lived, was the house that the Gestapo used when they were there. And that's the house through those gates. What they didn't know was, see those bushes in the background there? Mm. But in those bushes is an opening to the huge aqueduct that runs right up to the mountain and used to bring water down to the bay, the Roman aqueduct.
Wow.
And the kids used to use it as a place to run messages from the Australian and New Zealand airmen and soldiers who were there hiding, and the Brits, down to the bay during the war.
So right,
so it was
by
right
his
under
house.
their noses. You know, it was like Brer Rabbit and the rabbit. And so I thought that was an extraordinary thing. And you can still see the 29
Yeah.
stencil.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's why that's there, and that gets a mention in the book.
And then we have, is this the, what's the significance of this picture?
That's just typical of one of the abandoned houses that are used by the North African stateless men who come, jump off ships and swim ashore. And they've got nowhere to go. They've got no papers. They've got nothing. You know, the north of Africa is only 300 kilometres away from Crete, and they jump off ships as they near Greece. And they live in these deserted houses. They don't seem to cause trouble, apparently, according to the locals. They just have a quiet life with candles, because they can't pay for electricity. They wash their clothes in the sea, and they sell things. You know, they have various little things that they can sell. But they're sort of lost, you know.
And how do they feature in the storyline? Are they suspects or?
One of them features, yes, definitely. The police officer told me that, no, not the police officer, one of the people I interviewed over there told me that they try and round them up and put them in a detention centre in Athens, but they let them out to help with the olive picking. And very few of them go back.
When they're useful.
Which is understandable. So they have a nice life on Crete.
And then
and that's I just put that in because it's just so beautiful. And that's near the church in Kissamos, was the little place that we lived in for a few months while I was researching and interviewing locals and people. And that's the dreaded black voodoo, the black lily.
Does look rather sinister.
That the black lily grows at the place where the Cretan goddess Dictina has her temple. I was very keen to see the temple. There's not much of it left now. In fact, if you went there, you wouldn't even know that there'd been a temple there, except there are a few buildings left, but all the marble's been appropriated. The Greeks are very practical people, and if they see a nice slab of marble on an old ruin, they'll use it to do something in their garden or to prop up the chook shed. You know, they sort of pinch from the past to make the present more comfortable, which is quite sensible, but probably drives the archaeologists mad. And her temple, Dictina's temple, she's a sort of Artemis Diana figure. She's also known as the goddess of the nets. She's the fisherman's goddess, and they used to call on her when they had bad weather.
So we have a question come in from the audience, just to pause us in our Crete landscape, where Pauline Wall has asked, what in particular attracted you to writing crime fiction?
Well, I didn't mean to, Pauline. I didn't mean to write crime fiction. I just wrote what I thought was a rattling good yarn when I wrote Fortress, and they just put me into the crime section, and I've sort of been there ever since. I didn't mean to. I thought, it's the marketing people. And then I thought, oh, well, then I came to see that the crime is really good. It suits my nature, because it gets the story up and running. To structure a good story that people want to read, there are certain rules, and you can break them if you know them. But if you don't know them, it's probably not a good idea to break them. And a crime novel has a terrific structure already almost imposed on it. So you don't have to worry too much about structure, because the crime is the inciting incident. That's the thing that kicks the whole thing off. And then you'd go into the second act, which is because I'm an old-fashioned girl, I still go with Aristotle and the 3-act structure or the 5-act structure. And that then the investigation, and then there's the denouement when, you know, there's the chase or the arrest or whatever. So it's already got a very nicely inbuilt scaffolding, which the writer just has to fill in. That's the hard part.
Thank you, Pauline. If there's any more questions, please don't hold back. This is an Ask the Author. We want you to interrupt. We want you to, this is your opportunity to ask someone who's been writing for quite some time.
Oh, yes.
So, I'm running through this slideshow that Gabrielle kindly provided as part of the backdrop to the sisters' landscape. And so this was, you spent some time there recently, what, 2 years ago, was it? A whole...
oh, no, much longer than that. The last time I was there was 10 years ago. And
wow.
And then before that, my husband and I lived there for a few months. And we had this, they called it a villa. Well, it wasn't my idea of a villa, but anyway, just opened out, the backyard was Roman baths. I mean, this is the amazing thing about Crete. It's just full of extraordinary surprises. So you'd walk out around the back and there were the Roman baths. Of course, once again, stripped of their marble, the columns lying all broken, but there they were. And this picture here is the Sym Synagogue in Chania, and I spent time there talking to the man who had basically rebuilt it from, well, it was left in a terrible derelict way, and the Cretans, being practical people, used it as a chook house. And so he and some volunteers cleaned it all out, rebuilt it, cleaned out the mikveh, and it's just now the most beautiful place of meditation. And people can go there from all over the world, and they do, and it's a lovely place. And that's where I used to sit and write notes and just dream and look. And that's Kisamos Bay, where we had the little house, the little hovel. Oh, sorry, I meant villa. What am I saying? Naughty.
And do you find
that honestly just slipped out?
Is that part of your process, even when you're back here on Australian shores? Do you find that you need to get out and write your notes, or do you always?
No,
person that
pretty
has
homebound. No, maybe I used to, but no, I don't. I'm so well set up here. It's more convenient just to do it here.
Do you have a notebook stashed in your handbag for all events?
No, I'm not like that. I wish I were. I admire, Helen Garner's constant notebooks. I just don't work like that.
Yeah. So you've got the structure, you've got the plot. You like to kind of articulate, which is probably why you were drawn to writing crime fiction, because do you use any of the writing software to kind of structure your layouts? Or?
No, look, those sorts of things just make my brain freeze. Anything that looks like what do you call them? Flow chart?
Yeah.
I'm out the door.
Right.
My mind does not embrace that stuff.
Yeah, because we had an event with Suzanne Leal recently, and she has written The Deceptions recently. She's also another local author, and she is very much, she wants the structure, she writes the world and does all of that. So you're a little bit more organic, I suppose. Chaotic
might be the word.
It all comes together.
Creative chaos.
We have another question from our lovely audience. What do you like to read? So you've mentioned that you're a precocious reader. What is in your...
Well, I read strange and wonderful things. I don't mean to sound like a boring old fart, but I probably am. I don't read much fiction, although I did read Michael Rowbottom's The Secret She Keeps after watching the series. I've got that on my Kindle. So that'll be the last sort of crime thriller I've read. But now I read non-fiction. So, what have I got here?
And was that
readings.
always the case, or is it just a recent?
Oh, it's been increasingly like that for maybe the last 20 years. I think it might be an age thing. You know, running out of time, you think, gosh, I've got to know more about the world or something.
Yeah, I guess
In a non-fiction way, yeah.
someone described, you know, crime fiction, you can kind of, once you've read a lot, you can kind of guess it. And if you're the type that likes to be surprised, then it probably has a lifetime where you want to
Yes,
as opposed to guess the whodunit.
yes. Well, I mean, I was talking, had an email. I emailed with Michael Rowbottom, and he talked about how bored we are with the serial killer story because, oh, not another serial killer story, sort of thing. And how I think his last book was a very interesting example of how a very damaged, menacing woman who's been awfully hurt can be extremely dangerous, you know. And there's a depth to that. There's a humanity to that you don't get in the psychopathic, sadistic, you know, serial killers.
Yeah. And so what are those non-fiction books that are rattling around in your to-be read pile at the moment?
I have my pile here, see, just beside me. And there's this one, this one, The Beginning of Wisdom, Reading Genesis. Now that's probably not everybody's cup of tea. What else have I got? Oh, I've got my own book here because it's desperate when you're reading your own work. But an American screenwriter and Hollywood agent are pitching these the Gemma Lincoln novels to various production companies to see if we can get them made into a television series or, sorry, a Netflix or something like that. So I've got to reread them all because I've forgotten them, you know.
So tell us about that process, because that's a very different, I mean, it's still, the format of film is still storytelling, but do you get involved with the playwright?
I won't be. I will leave that to the screenwriter because it's a different look. It's the way I look at it. It's like trying to make the same music on the violin as you do on a piano. That's how different they are.
Yeah.
With this, you know.
Have you tried?
Well, I've done some courses and I've, you know, tried writing it, but it's a talent that you know, has to be developed, and I haven't developed it really much. So yeah. I'm very happy to leave it to someone who's done a lot more in that area than I have.
Do you like to retain control, or do you go, right, leave that over there? That's
it depends.
Skill, I'll keep the book.
Well, there's three of us involved. There's me, the screenwriter, and the director, and we're a team. And I think we'll all be involved in different ways as co-producers.
Yeah, yeah. And was that your experience when you did Whipping Boy and Fortress way back when, and the Conspiracy 365? Were you very involved?
No, I just took the money and ran. Because that was a massive job. You know, the woman who did that, bless her, she's no longer with us. She had 12 massive storyboards in her office, you know, ranged right along the walls. It was a nightmare job, storylining all that, and then filming, you know, getting up at 4 a.m. for these shoots. And I was so pleased I wasn't involved, really, honestly, Christine.
So you were happy to relinquish control. You're like, here's
very happy to relinquish control in that case. And those poor kids, you know, at the end of book 12, they're in winter in Dublin, in Ireland, and they're running up a hill, and they did the shoot in a green part of Melbourne, beautiful green area, and they're all rugged up, and it was 42 degrees, you know, these poor little actors.
Oh dear, I can imagine. I'm from Ireland, and I know exactly what they were going through.
It would have been awful, 42 degrees.
And so when you saw the final result of some of the, you obviously have a picture in your head of what your characters look like and what the landscape looks like. And then when you see them depicted in someone else's view on screen, were you surprised in any way? Did you kind of go, I wish I had control, or did you just go, I'm glad I wasn't involved? Or how was the experience for you?
I loved Conspiracy. I thought they did a really good job with that, and the young actors were terrific. Fortress, I thought the shooting was good, but the baddies were there at fever pitch right from the start, so there was nowhere for them to build, and that I thought that was a mistake. But a lot of the kids that were the kids at the school have gone on, like Asha Keddy, she was in there. She was one of the young girls, at the school. It's because it's the kidnapping of a small school by these evil dudes. I based it on a real event in Victoria that happened in the early 70s, I think it was.
Yeah.
So that
quite often where your story, do you just see a thread of a storyline and you go, that would be great.
Yes,
pick on that.
Just hits. Something hits. It's amazing. There's all these ideas. It's like, signal intelligence, all these signals in the air, and then one of them just suddenly comes, and I think, yes, I'll have you. I can do something with you. It's a weird system.
Yeah, I can imagine. So we have another
process.
Questions from the audience. We've got Helene, who's asked, how attached are you to your characters, or are you attached at all?
They're like friends in a different dimension. They're like people I know. I don't think I'm attached to them, and yet look, that's a very interesting question. I've never thought about that. Am I attached to my character? Well, I've made them up. So I must be attached to them, but I'm not aware of my attachment. Put it that way. Yeah, they seem quite distinct from me, like real people.
Because I mean, I guess you read of some authors being they want to see their characters portrayed in some way, and they feel a bit affronted when they see the screenwriting, how they've depicted them, and obviously you don't seem to have that. Yeah. So do you think you just let them go? You've obviously got a very good sense of knowing when to let go and when to keep control.
Well, I think with Sisters, not Sisters, Gemma, the Gemma Lincoln series, there's 5 of those novels. I would not want too much change done to those characters because they're highly developed over 5 books. One of them is a psychotherapist, and the other sister is an ex-cop private investigator. And they're both very different, as siblings are in families. And I wouldn't like them to change that. There was some talk of putting it in London by an earlier group that wanted to develop it as a television series. But that would feel wrong to me because they're very Aussie women, and they're Australian crimes. It just wouldn't work in London. The whole story.
So that particular series.
It didn't happen.
You're more attached to those, would you say?
Well, I didn't know about this plot until later. The series didn't go ahead because it just didn't go ahead. The principal died, and that was the end of it. So if I'd heard about that, I wouldn't have been happy. Mm-hmm. But I only heard later, so no harm done.
And well, sisters and siblings come up a fair bit in your work. Is that drawn from your own family, or?
Well, there used to be 6 of us. One escaped to heaven a couple of years ago, very sadly. But now we are 5. Yes, so I've come from a big family.
Mm-hmm. And so that's probably where your relationships and the sisters and
Yeah, well, maybe. I mean, we were all, no, I won't go into my family because it's too crazy, but we all felt like only children, really.
Yeah, yeah. So we've got another question from the floor. Your
Yes.
descriptions of Crete in Sisters are wonderfully evocative, but there are a lot of Greek islands. I'm wondering, is there any particular reason why you chose Crete as your setting?
Thank you, Flicky. I chose Crete because I actually have a Cretan great-grandfather, and he came to Australia in 1860 odd. He was a ship's he was a seaman, and he left the ship and went to the goldfields at Bendigo, married an English woman. And my mother was very fond of her Cretan grandfather and wanted to call the baby one of us, there's 6 of us, the last one born, David, the baby, wanted to call him Constantine after Constantinos. And we were horrible little, awful children. We were all saying, no, Mum, Con the Greek, no, no, no. You know, you have no idea what we were like in the 50s. We were shockers. And I think it would have been a marvellous name now, but in the 50s it was just too wild.
Right.
The use of garlic was considered very continental and very strange in Australia in the 50s.
But why Crete and not another island? Is it just because you had...
Because of the connection. I had been there to near the little village where the great-grandfather grew up, and I think that's why I wanted to go there to see what he'd left. In 1860, it would have been very wild indeed. I mean, still pretty wild place. They still do the crazy gun firing into the streets and up into the air when they're celebrating. It's not uncommon to hear that.
Yeah.
But they're very warm people, very friendly, warm people. And I think that's why, because Crete's just beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's been invaded, so often.
Just going to show this photo.
Yes.
It's why wouldn't you want to hang out in Crete? Look at that, it's so beautiful. So
you're looking, yes. That's the altar at Dictina's temple. And Xanthi hides something there. And you look through this window made of stone of the blocks and out into the bay. And it was a huge sanctuary and healing place. And the Romans used to use it too. There's a Roman road that goes for the 40 odd Ks between where this, might be 40 miles. No, 40 Ks between Dictina's temple and Kissamos. And it's all there, the big Roman blocks, the road's still there. And you think of the slaves who build those roads in the Cretan heat. But it's all overgrown because that's how it is with Crete. They haven't got the money really to develop all these archaeological places.
Yeah, too many. They're an embarrassment of them.
Well, that's right. That's right. I asked somebody who lives there, where do you go to find archaeological objects, sites? And he said, where do you go where there aren't any? I mean, there's just nowhere where there are.
It's not the same, no.
And this is one of the. It's a bit Irish, but that's what he was saying. And this is looking west to Bramvusia, one of the headlands. If you look at the map of Crete, the island, it's got 2 little horns on the northwest, and Kissamos is right in the middle of the 2 little horns. And it was a beautiful Roman port 2,000 years ago. And it's a beautiful place.
Mm.
And that's the big cistern up at the top that the Romans built. That dark, that's all water there. They hewed it out of the rock, and it used to run down to the bay. The people living up the hill still use it for their water needs 2,000 years later.
Wow.
What have the Romans ever done for us?
Look at
That's
those
a line from
poppies.
that's just by the side of the road. By the lovely Cretan poppies.
Man, this was your final slide.
Flanders poppies.
Who's this lovely Grecian? I could just imagine a wreath on his head.
Oh, I know, isn't he perfect? That was Stelios, who showed me around and took me around to all the unknown archaeological places and said, why don't they develop this? Why don't they do this? You know, why can't they do that? And that's his wine that he puts down. They very self-sufficient. When a child is born, they plant trees for them so that they've got something to harvest when they're adult.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so that I mean, just looking at the timestamp on the photo, this was 10 years ago.
That was 10 years ago when I was there, back there.
Yeah. Wow. So it took, how long do you think, sisters, took you in the end? It was...
Well, it's been brewing for many, many years, Christine. It took me about a year to write, I guess. Yes.
It was there in the wings. And so what's, can you share about the story that's currently percolating, or is it too...
Well, I just started with a sort of a scene that came into my head of a detective on leave going back to a country town, not unlike the country town in Fortress, which was called Sunny Flats, I think, based on a place that my first husband, late first husband, and I had as a small school. And he's coming back there. It's a place that is where he feels he's been a complete failure, because under his watch 20 years ago, when he was the young copper there, 2 little kids went missing and he never was able to find out what happened to them. And he's just come back because he's been told by a friend of his that they've found some new evidence there and they want him to come up and have a look. Or would he like to come up and have a look? Would he like to? So it was just a mate calling him, saying they've found something up in the mountain and maybe you should. So he's driving up, and that's, you know, will he? I don't know what's going to happen next. It's a thriller for me too, but I think it will. I know what's happened to the children. I've got that worked out. So once I get the beginning and the end, it's just really a matter of filling in all the rest.
Yeah, yeah. And who would you say, you've mentioned a couple of names throughout this little conversation, but who would you say holds most influence for your writing career? Like who has influenced you to take the direction you've taken?
I can't really name anyone who has influenced me to take the direction. The direction takes me, actually. If you're talking about writers that might have influenced me, I'm not. I can't answer that question. I've thought about that, but look, probably everything I've read's influenced me. I used to like Graham Greene very much, but he's become. When I went back to him, I thought, God, you poor depressed man.
So he was there for a good point in time, and then
that's right.
And
a couple of the Irish writers I used to like very much.
Yeah. And another person from the audience has just asked about, do you write every day, and do you have set times to write, and how many hours at a time do you write? We've covered that a little bit, but if you wouldn't mind.
Look, I'm having a sabbatical this year, so I'm not writing every day. I'm just doing my 1,000 words a month for the writers group and seeing where that goes. But when I am writing, I tend to write in the mornings and then have the afternoons off. Or I'll write any time. But I mean, it's not so much the hours of writing. It's the rule of 1,000 words a day when I am writing. That's the important thing. Now, I can I can muck around and whack out 1,000 words after dinner or something, or after lunch. I just don't go anywhere till I've done that when I'm writing, which I'm not doing this year. So
Yeah.
that's my routine.
So
it's the word
so
count
that's the discipline.
rather than the hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those 1,000 words, do you look back on, like what happens then?
Oh yes, I'm constantly reviewing them. You know, every time I open the document, I start reading it from the beginning again and think, ouch, you know, that's awful, fix that up. So I'm sort of writing and rewriting at the same time as pushing the story forward at the other end, you know. So
Yeah.
it's a constant revisioning going on.
And when you do finally hand it in to your publisher or your editor, how hard is it to get that first edit back? Like what's the emotion there? Are you a bit like, oh, I don't know if I want to go through this?
Oh, well, you know, you get back this horribly messed up manuscript. You send off a beautiful, clean thing, and this thing comes back with, you know, I mean, in the old days, it used to be red pen,
Yeah.
scrawled almost on every line of every page, comments, and then, you know, maybe 5 or 6 pages of tightly typed questions and suggestions. And I think, oh no. But, you know, I just sit down and I just start at the first one, plod through them all.
So
Mostly
you have
I
to
agree.
trust.
Sorry?
You have to build up a relationship, obviously, with your editor.
Well, if they're good, and I mean, the editors I've had have been pretty good. They're looking at it from the outside, you know, a place I can't really see. I can only see it from the inside making.
Yeah.
And because I know everything in my head, it might well be the case that I haven't bothered to actually mention something that's important, because I think, oh, I know that, so it's would be somewhere there, and it's not. And I also have terrible difficulties with time. And one editor said, Gabrielle, are you aware that this day has gone on for 36 hours? And I wasn't. You know, so I have to break things up. I just want to tell the story. I hate all those interruptions, you know, working out days and hours. And
That's what the editor's for, right?
oh, bless them. And look, they're such wonderful people. They make me seem much smarter than I really am.
So, you know, we probably have some versioning writers, you know, who are watching us today. Is there any piece of advice you'd like to give them after 40 years in a very long career?
What would have I don't know if I would have listened actually 40 years ago, because I knew everything then. It's been a steady loss of knowledge ever since. I'd say persistence. You know, Bryce Courtney used to talk about bum glue, just staying at the desk, sitting on the chair, don't get up, keep at it. Write about something that makes you feel angry or happy, or you've got to feel a book, you know.
Yeah. Before I let you leave a lasting message, you know, one last message, we're actually almost to time. Can you believe it? That hours seem to fly by.
Yes.
Helene has asked another question. Does what editor suggestion sometimes, when an editor suggests something to you, is there sometimes it just does not resonate for you, or does it even annoy you? Like, has there been moments where you've received some feedback and you're like, why? I don't like that. That's making me angry or frustrated.
Well, I'm pretty detached from, you know, by this stage of my life, I'm pretty detached from my work. I just feel, well, that's not right. That's not, you know, that's not the right note. She's hit the wrong note there, and I just ignore it. I don't do what the suggestion was. That's all. I mean, it's the writer's work after all. Editors can only make suggestions and comments of how it appears to them, and most of them are very good. And I think one of the great things to learn is not to become emotionally involved about the editing process. Editors are there to help. They're not there trying to, interfere with your work, because it's your baby, and you can override any editor's suggestion anytime. So
we've had just a comment. What a delightful, insightful conversation. I look forward to reading some more of your books. So that came from Jenny.
That's a very kind thing to say. Thank you so much.
So we are just about to wrap it up. So if anyone has any last questions, get them in right now, because in the next minute we'll be closing the event. Gabrielle, thank you so much for your time.